The soil on Mars looks like dirt, but the moment you water it, it starts making poison. And that single chemical fact ends every Mars farming plan ever written. This isn't a cold problem. It isn't a pressure problem. Every science fiction film that showed you a greenhouse dome with green plants pushing through red soil was teaching you the wrong lesson. The real barrier isn't engineering, it's chemistry. And chemistry doesn't negotiate. Picture the scene you were sold: a sealed dome on the Martian surface, red soil tilled into neat rows, seeds pressed into the ground, water added carefully through irrigation lines. The same logic that works in your backyard scaled up to a different planet. That image feels right, because farming is something humans understand at a cellular level. You put a seed in dirt, you add water, life appears. It's the most fundamental thing our species has ever learned to do. On Mars, that logic runs straight into a wall. The wall isn't temperature. The wall isn't the thin atmosphere pressing down like the air at the summit of the highest mountain on Earth. The wall is the soil itself, which has been sitting on that surface for billions of years, quietly accumulating a class of chemicals that are harmless when dry and lethal the moment water arrives. Those chemicals are called perchlorates. On Earth, they exist in certain industrial sites, certain desert regions, certain rocket fuel compounds, and their presence in drinking water is strictly regulated because even trace amounts at sustained exposure begin to attack the human thyroid. The level at which Earth's health agencies consider perchlorate dangerous in a water supply is already very low. Martian soil contains roughly 10 times that concentration, spread uniformly across the entire planetary surface. Not concentrated in one region, not isolated in patches you could avoid. 10 times the legally dangerous threshold in every shovelful of Martian regolith from pole to pole. There is no clean side of the planet. There is no region that tested better than another. Mars has been bombed by cosmic radiation for billions of years without a magnetic field to deflect it. And that radiation has driven chemical reactions in the surface layer that produced perchlorates everywhere, uniformly and thoroughly. Here is what perchlorates do when they get wet. They dissolve. They become mobile. And once dissolved, they absorb directly through plant tissue into the food, the same way fertilizer absorbs into vegetables when you water a garden. The perchlorate doesn't announce itself. It has no taste. The tomatoes look red. The lettuce looks green. The food looks exactly like food. But the perchlorate is inside it now, moving through every cell of the plant, because that is what dissolved minerals do when they travel through a root system and up into edible tissue. You eat the plant. You eat the perchlorate. Your thyroid, the gland at the base of your throat that controls your metabolism, your energy levels, your body temperature regulation, your ability to think clearly, it starts failing. The gland that perchlorates attack first and hardest because perchlorates chemically block it from absorbing the iodine it needs to function. The gland doesn't fail suddenly. It fails gradually, over months, in a way that first feels like fatigue, like cloudiness, like an inability to stay warm. Then it feels like your body is shutting down department by department, because it is. Imagine a factory where one supply chain gets quietly cut. The machinery keeps running for a while on reserves. The workers keep showing up. The output drops slowly, then faster, and by the time someone notices the finished product count is down by half, the reserves have been empty for weeks. Your thyroid runs the same way. You don't feel the perchlorate on day 1. You feel it on month 4, when you can't get warm no matter how many layers you wear. when your heart rate has slowed to something that feels like moving through water, when your body is metabolizing food at half the rate it should. Without treatment, without thyroid hormone replacement therapy, which requires a constant pharmaceutical supply chain from Earth, that failure becomes fatal. A colony that grows its food in Martian soil has not solved the food problem. It has traded starvation for poisoning on a slow timer. And that's before we address what's happening above the soil. Mars has no global magnetic field. Earth has one. It wraps around the entire planet like an invisible shield, deflecting the constant stream of charged particles the sun throws outward and the high-energy radiation that pours in from the rest of the galaxy. Without that shield, radiation hits the Martian surface directly. You absorb about 5 times more radiation per year on Mars than on Earth at sea level. To put that in terms that carry physical weight, a nuclear power plant worker on Earth is legally required to stop working and leave the site when their annual radiation dose reaches a certain threshold, because at that threshold, the cancer risk becomes unacceptable. On Mars, you would hit a comparable dose in less than 2 years without any special exposure, just living there. After 5 years of Martian surface exposure, your cancer risk has doubled compared to what it was when you arrived. After 10 years, it has quadrupled. Now bring that radiation back to the food. Any plant growing in Martian soil, even assuming you somehow solved the perchlorate problem, is sitting under the same unshielded sky. Radiation doesn't stop at the greenhouse wall unless the wall is specifically engineered as a radiation barrier, which means dense materials, which means enormous weight, which means the construction cost spirals upward before you have planted a single seed. But even if you shield the greenhouse walls, the soil itself has been irradiated for billions of years. The radiation doesn't just pass through crops, it alters cellular tissue in ways that accumulate. Plants absorb radiation-damaged compounds from irradiated soil. You eat those compounds. Your body keeps a running count. The count doesn't reset. Every meal adds to the total, and the total eventually crosses a line your immune system cannot come back from. This is what a year on Mars actually looks like. You are sitting in your habitat. You have a headache that has been there for 3 weeks. Your joints ache in a way that suggests your body is aging faster than the calendar says it should. Your thyroid levels are off. The blood test confirms it, though the medication supply is limited, and the next resupply ship is 14 months away. The food you grew in the hydroponics bay tastes fine. It looked fine when you harvested it. But something in the soil contact record shows that a water line ran through a patch of regolith before the filtration system caught it, and now there's a question mark over 12 weeks of lettuce production. You don't know how much perchlorate got in. You have no way to test for it at the level of precision you'd need. You eat it anyway, because the alternative is a caloric deficit you can't afford. Mars didn't kill you dramatically. It is killing you in the accounting, in the slow-running total of every small compromise made when the engineering didn't hold and the supply chain was 400 million kilometers away. The only actual solution to Martian soil chemistry is to not use Martian soil at all. A fully sealed hydroponic system, plants growing in water or in growing medium that was either brought from Earth or manufactured from sterile materials with no regolith contact whatsoever, avoids both the perchlorate problem and the radiation in soil problem simultaneously. This is not a partial fix. It is an absolute requirement. Not try to filter the soil. Not treat the soil with chemicals. The perchlorate is in every layer, dissolves the instant water is added, and migrates through a water system within days of contact. One contaminated soil sample touching one water line can spread through an entire irrigation network in the time it takes to notice the readings are wrong. The weight cost of this approach is where the math becomes brutal. A hydroponic system large enough to sustain 4 people long-term, caloric sufficiency, nutritional variety, enough buffer for crop failures, weighs more than the habitat it sits inside. That growing medium, the nutrients, the infrastructure, the shielding, every kilogram of it had to leave Earth on a rocket, travel 7 months through deep space, and survive a landing. Launching mass from Earth is the most expensive operation in human spaceflight. Each kilogram you add to the payload requires more fuel to accelerate it, and more fuel has weight, which requires more fuel to move that weight. The costs spiral upward with every additional kilogram added to the manifest. Shipping enough growing medium to feed 4 people for 5 years costs more in fuel alone than almost every other component of the mission combined. You are not farming a planet. You are farming inside a sealed box on a planet whose surface actively destroys everything that box is trying to protect. The bitterest part of this story is the thing we celebrated when we found it: water on Mars. Subsurface ice, polar caps, confirmed water molecules in the regolith. The headlines described it as the discovery that made colonization possible, because water means life, and water means farming, and water means humans could eventually become self-sufficient without shipping everything from Earth. Every colonization pitch that came after leaned on water as the turning point. What those pitches didn't emphasize, and what the chemistry makes clear, is that water on Mars is not a resource in the traditional sense. It is an activator. The moment water touches Martian soil, it activates the perchlorates sitting in that soil. The thing we needed to grow food is also the trigger that makes the soil poisonous. Finding water on Mars didn't make farming possible. It revealed a brand new mechanism by which any attempt at farming becomes lethal. The barrier to Mars colonization that nobody in a pitch deck ever shows you isn't the rocket size, or the transit time, or the habitat pressure. It's a jar of powder that sits harmlessly on a shelf until you add water. And then it starts producing something that will shut down your thyroid and work its way into every crop you grow. Biology and soil chemistry are the wall. The wall is not dome-shaped. And until someone figures out how to either neutralize perchlorates at planetary scale or ship enough sterile growing medium to feed a permanent colony indefinitely, every Mars farming plan ever written ends at the same place, at the moment the water line opens and the soil begins to react.